Welcome to the F50 Woman Podcast, dedicated to sharing stories from a diverse community of women in order to provoke you into a passionate pursuit of life, build unshakable character, and achieve extraordinary things. Now, here is your host, Julia Jack.
Some girls start out with challenges that make their dreams seem almost impossible. But girls who grow into women of renown never let their dreams turn into fantasies. They learn how to push past their insecurities, find their voice, become whole, and pivot through some of the biggest challenges of their lives. This is today's story. Here we go on another steady but challenging ride through the life journey of another F50 woman. Welcome. This is F50 Woman. This is Julia Jack here, and I'm with Carolyn Alessi. And she is a Christian. We do go to church together, which is a blessing. She is a project director at a major hospital. So she's a leader. She's been a leader in the public and nonprofit sectors. She is currently appointed by the Lieutenant Governor as the chair of Million Women Mentors of Connecticut chapter. And that's, maybe I'll let Carolyn share what that is, but it has to do with women and girls in STEM. She is also a member of the Governor's Council on Women and Girls Education and STEM Subcommittee. Again, I'm stepping all over that very incredible stuff that you're doing. I'm going to let her explain that as we get into who she is now. Well, welcome, Carolyn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Julia. It's great to be here.
So I want to just start off before we get to all the amazing stuff you're doing now. I just want to get to know who you were as a young girl. Who were you? What did you want to be? Tell us about you.
Okay, well, the young girl that Carolyn was is not the woman I am today. Thank goodness. So I was born in Texas, Killeen, Texas. I was born into a military family. My dad was in the Army, and my mom is Korean. And so she came straight from Korea with no real education, just born there and then came here as a married woman. And in my younger years, I had some really challenging times. I'm an identical twin. And in my kindergarten, early elementary years, I had a speech impediment. And so I had a lot of issues with speaking, stuttering, lisp. And it was a very challenging time because I think that point really made me very insecure about my voice. And I also had some hearing issues. I had chronic ear infections, and I also had a lot of allergies. So every time I spoke, I sounded nasally and congested. And so it was a very challenging time as I went through my elementary and middle school years to really feel confident about myself and speaking. And so I became extremely shy, just kind of a bookworm. Every time, a teacher would ask me a question in school, I would perspire and my heart would flutter and I would get really nervous and I would stumble over my words. And so it was a really challenging time. And then when I entered into high school, I really thought, okay, maybe I can kind of get a hold of myself and get my insecurities under control. And so I was a runner. So I ended up joining the track team and did really well my freshman year. By my sophomore year, I made varsity. And by my junior year, we were getting scouted by different colleges. And I had an opportunity to be scouted by UPenn. But then I ended up fracturing my ankle and my times really suffered. And so unfortunately, that dream of running in college was not going to happen. And then right into my college years, that was kind of a bit of a struggle. I really was excited about going to college. I really wanted to make my dad proud. I grew up in a single parent household and my dad primarily raised us and he'd never gone to college. He spent his entire career in the military. And so I thought, well, this is my chance to kind of go to school. And unfortunately, after my first semester at Springfield College, I ended up having to withdraw and work at Dunkin' Donuts and wait 2 years to save up money to go back to school. And I ended up going to UMass Lowell, majoring in political science. And of course, that required a lot of public speaking, which, as I told you earlier, I had a lot of issues with my speech. And so that was a big stretch, but I really felt in my heart that I wanted to do good in the world and be in politics and be one of those good politicians that was honest, had integrity, and so I really fought to overcome a lot of my insecurities around public speaking and really tried to do my best. I even joined the debate club. We had a model UN debate team, and that really forces you to get out there and really debate your ideas and your thoughts around a particular issue. But, my college years, it took me, most people, it takes 4 years. It took me about 8 years to finish my undergrad. And that was always a sore point of contention because I always felt like embarrassed about that. But, fast forward years later, it doesn't matter. I finished.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so what I heard was that you had an ambition to get into politics, and that's what encouraged you to do more speaking. Was there a mentor? Was there anything else that got you over that hump of, wow, I had such a hard time with it when I was younger, and now I'm just going to dive right into it? Or was that all sort of self-motivated?
It was self-motivated because I felt like there was always something inside of me that was trying to burst out,
Okay.
and I knew I had a lot of potential. I just didn't know how to unleash it
Okay.
and get it out there. I do remember having an amazing poli-sci professor, and he really pushed me and stretched me a lot to grow in this area of public speaking because he really saw that I did have the ability to do it and do it well. I just needed the confidence, and I need to be able to formulate my words because when you're shy, you formulate your words in your mind, but when they come out, it's a mess because in your mind, it sounds so great.
Yes.
And then verbally, you're just like, I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yes.
It really helped me to formulate my words in a way that allowed me to be articulate, to be able to express my thoughts in a well-rounded way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it was part self-motivation and part just him really seeing something in me.
This may seem like a strange question, but do you feel like the challenges earlier and the hesitation actually helps you to be more calm when you're speaking? And I ask that because when I watch you, you're very composed, you're very purposeful, whereas some people get really excited. And even though they don't come out incoherent, it's a different kind of energy, but you come across as very, like I said, measured and well-spoken and very thoughtful. Does a combination of the challenge and the overcoming create that formula, or do you think it's just practice, practice, practice?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure, Julia. I've never really thought a lot about it, but I think it's a combination. I think in my years of being in corporate community relations, you have to really be careful with your words. And certain words could trigger a positive response or a negative response, no matter what your message is. And so I think through that training, really understanding that certain words, you have to really be careful in how you come out with those words. And so I think I've taken an approach of being personable, but then also really making sure that I stick to what it is that I want to be said and don't go off the rails too much. And so I'm not necessarily scripted, but I also am aware that I need to have some type of boundary around what I say, especially in public speaking.
Okay. Well, I might be touching base with you a little bit more in the future because I'm an off the rails kind of speaker most of the time. So let's jump over sort of the middle part of your life from that college experience. Let's find out who you are now. Tell us about who you are, what you do, and what you're like.
Sure. So I am currently working as a project director for a healthcare system that I never thought I would ever be in. It's been a great fit for me professionally and in terms of my own personal interest because it's a community-based hospital. And I also never envisioned myself being sort of a well-known person within a community because my whole life I've always been uprooted and never really had roots. And so I've always been an unknown person throughout my whole entire life because we've only stayed in certain places a couple of years and then we would move because of the military. So being in Connecticut and my name being recognized before I even show up, especially in certain community spaces, corporate spaces, or even in the legislative offices, it's kind of interesting. I never thought that my name would ever go that far. Right. But one of the things that I think was a pleasant surprise and has come full circle is, I mentioned I was a poli-sci major, and I had great visions of working in public office, in public administration, and that never really came to fruition. So now here, many years later, I am on this Governor's Council for Women and Girls Education and STEAM subcommittee, and it's really the focus is to really make sure that we're taking all the great resources in Connecticut and bringing them together in one centralized location so that parents, educators, and community leaders can know where to go for anything that's around education and STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
Right.
And so I was a part of this subcommittee, and, I was asked to join, and I thought, okay, well, this is great. I'll just take a back seat because I know nothing about education and STEAM, but I think this is great to be able to be a part of something big and to have finally my poli-sci interests kind of come to fruition. So I'm sitting there and I'm a part of this committee, and lo and behold, the Commissioner of Higher Ed is looking at me going, almost expecting me to take on a leadership role. And I'm kind of shirking in the background going, don't look at me as someone that is going to lead this group because I don't know what they're talking about in terms of coding. So, but at the end of the day, I did take a leadership role, and that led me into being asked to assume state chair for the Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter. About 6 months later, the Lieutenant Governor's office called me and asked me if I would assume that role because they really were impressed with my leadership ability within the subcommittee and being able to work with people who are really incredibly talented and bright, but were really just subject matter experts. They just really saw how I was able to take those diverse interests and really bring them to kind of do something with it, but rather than go down a rabbit's hole of analyzing. And so they felt like this would be a great opportunity for me to take this on. And I felt like it was a big role and a big responsibility. And it was definitely more high profile than I was comfortable being in that kind of a spotlight. But at the same time, I looked at it as an opportunity to really be much more intentional around my leadership and to really take everything that I've learned over the years and the experiences I've had both in the private and public sector to be able to make a big difference. And this movement really focuses on young girls and women in STEM, really making sure that we're creating a strong pathway from the child who is interested in anything that surrounds STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math at their early years, and cultivating that interest through their middle school, high school, and college years so that ultimately they become professionals in this field and they end up becoming leaders in their field over time. And so this movement is really about making sure that these women have that opportunity and these young girls continue to have that mentoring of their interest. And so I think it's a great movement. We work with a lot of amazing people that live and breathe their particular field. And I think it's a great way to bring everything together to really promote STEM in Connecticut because we have a lot of great women in STEM and they're just not noticed.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying because it's about access, not only to the profession, but also to the professionals who can help to guide the way getting there.
Right.
So that's incredible. So I'm going to ask, what did it feel like when you got the call to be the leader for this program? What did that feel like? Because you mentioned that you never really expected you to be in this position, your name to be on that stage. So what did it feel like? Were you aghast?
It felt like it was a joke. I thought they were like kidding. I thought they got the wrong number. I was at my office and the general counsel for the lieutenant governor called and she said, I really need to speak with you. And I said, okay, did I do something wrong? I'm thinking in my head, did I make a misstep at the subcommittee meeting? And when she asked me, I literally just was stunned. I thought to myself, is she really asking me to take this role on? Or am I just kind of assuming she's asking me? So let me just make sure I'm clear.
Right.
And I said, are you asking me to assume this role? And she said, yes, we really felt impressed with the work you're doing within the subcommittee. We really want you to take this on. And I was surprised. I was really surprised, but I was really nervous because I thought, I'm not adequate enough to do this. I mean, I don't know much I'm not a STEM person. I feel like I'm in over my head. I had to inherit a subcommittee of 17 type A, strong, amazing, brilliant women that I didn't know, that I was literally meeting virtually. I've never met them before in my life. And very strong, women leaders in their fields. And so it was an intimidating ask. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know that I can measure up to this.
Right.
And so I was very nervous, a little bit excited, but then doubting myself. Can I actually do this? Did they get the right person? And I remember holding my first committee meeting, and the lieutenant governor came on, and I immediately kind of went into my shell. and it was a great first meeting, but it wasn't the best, because a lot of the women were, like, okay, who is this person? We've never heard of her before. And why is she state chair? So I think my insecurities got the best of me. But then after that, I was like, okay, I need to own this. I need to step up. I'm ready as I'll ever be, and I'll learn along the way. So just embrace it, Carolyn.
Yes, very nice. That's good for a lot of people to hear, because I understand that as women professionals, we can often do that to ourselves, where we sit back and we do that, which is comfortable and maybe a little stretch. But when we're called to a place we're not so comfortable, we can just be like, no, let somebody else do it. So that's awesome. So before I get off the rails, like I said, I often do, let's go back and tell us what changed everything for you. What changed you, or what brought you from that young woman in college, poli-sci, doing the debates, to now this woman who is leading leaders in all different ways?
So I think for me, there was a number of different things that kind of led me to where I'm at today. And so I talked about my deep insecurities around my speaking. And there was also an insecurity about who I am, because I come from a mixed race family, and I wasn't quite certain if I belonged with Black women, Black people, or Asian people, because I'm also Asian. And so I always struggled with that in my younger years, my identity. And it didn't help that my parents were not together. And so I didn't ever have a full picture of who I was as a person, because I had a lot of missing pieces to my life. I almost felt like I was adopted. When you're adopted, you don't know the full story of your life, where you come from, your heritage, who your family, extended family is. And even though I wasn't adopted, because my parents were not together, my mom was pretty much MIA my whole entire life up to the time I was 30. I really didn't know anything about her other than just small memories of her coming back in and out of our lives over time. And so that really created this void of who am I? And I think that fed into my insecurity. So whenever I would try to move myself forward, I always would have that self-doubt of, but you don't think you can do it, and I don't, you're not capable, and you don't even know who you are anyway. So when people ask you about your personal life and how you grew up, you don't even have answers for that. So it was one of those things where I just felt like I couldn't go anywhere until I could figure that piece out. And it wasn't until I had my second daughter, and she was about 2 months old, and my dad was battling cancer, and he was in his 4th year of battling, and that the cancer diagnosis he had is a 5-year lifespan. And so I knew I didn't have a lot of time, and I knew that if I didn't reconcile this piece of my life, and I was an at-home mom at the time, I took a step back from my parents, stayed at home and raised my kids, that I would never get to where I wanted to be, or I could possibly be. And I knew that if my dad passed, then I would always forever have these blank spots in my life. And then how could I deal with that now that I have kids, and they would ask me about my upbringing and all that stuff. So it kind of led me to go on a search for my mom without telling any of my sisters or my dad, that I just wanted to find out for my own peace of mind. If I could find her, maybe I could find answers to myself. And so I did that, and I found a Korean private investigator, and within 3 weeks, he was able to locate her, and we reunited. And I say at that point, I remember telling my husband at the time, I finally feel whole. I finally feel like a whole person. She gave me her side of the story. She shared her upbringing. She shared about her challenges with the marriage, because I'd only known one side.
Yes.
And so I always felt like I didn't have the full picture. And now I finally felt like I was a whole person. And I think that was a big turning point for me, because that was where I literally felt so much more confident as a woman. At that point, I was in my early 30s, and I finally was like, okay, the insecurities kind of, faded away. And I finally felt like I can actually do some of the things that I've always thought I would love to do, but I couldn't do.
Right. Okay.
So those were the two in my personal life. I think those were the two defining points that kind of brought me over that hump of insecurity. And then, just being in the field that I was finally in, which was my dream job, being in corporate affairs, working for a global company, and being able to do community work and then also, use my business skills. I felt like that was a great accomplishment for me. I'd always dreamed of working at the UN. Even in college, I studied French since I was 7th grade and all the way through college. And my first job was in a French Canadian company, but I always thought I want to work for the UN. And that never really happened. But then all of a sudden, many years later, I was able to do it from the private sector side and work for the UN on the private sector side. And so that was a great dream that came true. So really, for me, I couldn't get there until I had to deal with the things in my personal life. But then once I got there, it was a challenge to stay there.
If you are enjoying the F50 Woman podcast, don't forget to share your positive comments and ratings and share us on all your favorite social media channels. F50 Woman is a movement created for women, spread by women. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show and your host, Julia Jack.
It was definitely a challenge to stay there because the more you start to put yourself out there, the more expectation leaders have on you, colleagues have on you, family has on you. And so for me, it was always a battle of, can I be enough for everybody?
Yeah.
Can I do enough for everybody? Can I continue to excel and be a great example, be a light to people? Because I had my faith and my faith was very important to me. Can I still be a light to people, even though I'm in a dog-eat-dog career where it's very cutthroat? Can I still be who I want to be as a Christian, as a spiritual person, and well respected in my corporation?
Right.
And so those were really challenging times because I had a lot of self-doubt, but a lot of drive. So it's like you have that self-doubt, but then you're still driving towards what you want.
Yep. Pulling in opposite directions. Yeah.
Right. But hoping that those doubts will turn into confidence and you'll see success along the way. So it was always a challenge for me in that respect. But I think the other part that really defined me was, and I think really led me to be where I am today was, when my husband passed away in 2013, I was at the height of my career. I finally had done everything I wanted to do in terms of the role that I wanted to reach, the dream job. I finished my MBA, turned 40 that year, and then 5 months later, he died unexpectedly. And so the rug was pulled out from under me within a blink of an eye. And my whole entire world just kind of came to a screeching halt and I was blindsided. And so it really was a lot for me to dig deep to try to go on with life.
Yeah.
And then to figure out what does life look like for me now as a 40-year-old woman with 2 children, 7 and 9, and no family around. That was a big change for me. It was a big change for me because it meant that I had to decide what was going to be most important to me, my career or taking care of my children and being available for them. And so that has led me down a whole different path and a whole different mindset after that. And my priorities completely shifted.
Okay. Did you ever get the answer to what sounded like, can you have it all? What is your conclusion?
Yeah, so my conclusion, Julia, is that you can have it all, but not at the same time. So you can have it all, but there's a point where you have to delay gratification. You have to be able to say, okay, it's not that I can't have this. It's just I can't have it right now.
Yes.
Because something else is taking precedence over that. Yeah. And that's what I had to come to a place of surrender. Yeah. That having it all didn't mean I'm this juggler on a unicycle having 5 plates spinning over and over again, hoping none of them fall off, which was really what my mentality was. And any woman that I spoke to who was at a level that I admired would say that.
Yes.
You just got to keep all those plates spinning.
Yes.
And that's how you have it all. And I came to realize at some point one of those plates is going to fall and crash on the floor. Right. And then what?
Yeah.
You have to pick up those broken pieces, and sometimes those broken pieces won't be able to be glued back together because you've made some lasting impact that might not be the positive impact you want on the situation, and I speak for myself, of my family, my children, like I can spin those plates pretty quickly. But once one of the plates crash, say like my home life, do I want to weigh the cost of what that means for me and the
Right.
impact down the road,
Right. Counting the costs and making the
Yeah.
choices. Yeah. And you might be able to have it, but maybe not
Right.
all at once. Especially when you have kids, it doesn't always work out well when they're big and you hear the responses of what it did to them and you wish you can go back and fix it,
Yeah,
but you just can't.
exactly. So I've had female bosses over the course of my time in corporate, and I always admired them. They're always VP or above, even CEOs. And I remember every single time when I felt like I was failing my family and wanted to take that next step to, improve my career, progress my career, I would sit down with them and they would say to me, Carolyn, I get it. It's hard. You've got a young family. And they were all empty nesters. Their children have graduated and gone off to college or they're in their professional career. And they would say to me, I just remember my son, telling me he's now 20 something years old, that he always remembered the day he broke his arm at football practice and I wasn't there for him. And
Wow.
she said, he'll remind me every single time. And I remember sitting there every single time they would share one of those stories about their kids. At the course of me trying to advance in my career, I remember telling myself in the back of my mind, I don't want that to be my story.
Yes.
But at the same time, I was like, how do I get to where they are without it being my story?
Yeah.
And that was always my challenge.
Yeah. So you didn't come up with a formula, you mean?
I think I came up with one now. When I was working at a large nonprofit, I was in a senior level role. And this is now 4 years after my husband passed. So I'm an only parent with daughters in middle school at the time. And this job was very demanding. I loved it, but it took me away from my family early in the morning, late at night, on the weekends. And if I wasn't working late at night, my mind was occupied by the work that needed to get done. And so I remember feeling a lot of pressure from my home life because my kids were like, Mom, you're never home for dinner. Mom, we're always having to go to Aunt Carol's house for dinner. You don't pick us up on time. You're always late picking us up from practice. We don't see you in the morning before we go to school. And when we come home from school, we don't see you. And I kind of was like, in my mind, I was like, well, yeah, but that's life. I'm trying to build a career for us. So it's okay. We'll get through this. You'll come out okay. And so I thought my solution was maybe the culture of my organization isn't going to be as family friendly. So let me look for another job that has an organization that puts family first, that really gives that flexibility.
Okay.
And so I have a wide and very deep network of relationships. So for a year and a half, I was trying to find a role that would fit me. And I remember going on interview after interview. And in my network, whenever you get an opportunity, it's always who you know, not what you know.
Right.
And so I know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going through these interviews and I remember the recruiters calling me saying, we've got a perfect role. The CEO wants you. They've seen you in, different settings. They really want you. So I go through the interview process and I get all the way up to the board of directors. I go through that sailing. Then they will call me at the end and they would say, you know what? We went with someone else.
Yeah.
We can't tell you really why. So this happened consecutively over the course of 9 months. And I thought, that's so bizarre. I'm like, not that I was feeling arrogant, but I was like,
what's happening?
What's happening here? And so one of the things, because I am a woman of faith, I realized, God, are you trying to tell me something?
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying to make something obvious to me? And I'm not wanting it to be obvious. I came to the conclusion he was making something obvious, that the environment was not going is the answer. The answer is you being home, available for your children. The answer is you being able to be that steady Eddie for them when they need it the most.
Okay.
And I remember my company going through a reorg, and they said, you can either take a job in Chicago where the central headquarters is, or you can take a package. And so I took a package. But then I was like, okay, now what do I do? And so I remember just realizing as I woke up the first day with no job, that my girls go to school at 7:45, but I don't see them until 3:45.
Right.
So I literally had this open window of nothing to do. But then when 3:45 hit, they came home, they dumped all their day's worries on me. They dumped all their gripes. They dumped all their excitement on me. I had lunch ready for them, dinner ready for them. And after a month of seeing this pattern, I realized this is what's important. It's not that I have to be home 100% full time. I just need to be available at those critical moments when they need me. And that takes away the conflict of siblings having to fill the role of the parent. And so I ended up finding a role that allowed me to work 20 hours a week. And that is where I really saw in the last 2.5 years that I can still be professionally productive and have an impact and be well respected and not lose my footing and be able to be there mentally and emotionally for my kids and physically for my kids, especially during the most critical times of their life.
Right. Yeah. As they get to that age, they don't need you every
Right.
second of the day, but
Exactly. I just needed to believe that there wasn't a solution to it,
yes.
because before I just believed the only solution was you have to work full time
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to try to find a company that's family friendly.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the solution. You know, I can be as productive and as effective as a leader and as a professional working less hours. And that gives me more time to help my kids grow and find their footing in life.
Yes. Yeah. And then you've gained a few tools, not only one to help other younger women who are coming through and have your dream, to help them navigate and figure out how to balance their family and their life. And then also, as we know, raising children, I'm talking about management skills. You learn, especially when you're raising teenagers and young adults,
Yes.
for sure. So if you, from this point, met yourself as a younger woman, what one piece of advice would you give her?
Gosh, I give her a lot of advice.
Okay. You can give more than one if you want to. Yeah.
I would say to her, don't let your situation, your circumstances define you or limit you. I think I let myself stay in a box of you're shy, you come from a broken home, it's taking you forever to finish college, you're not as intelligent as other people. I let myself stay in that box far too long. And because I had some hearing issues, I learned to not speak up and say, hey, I need you to repeat that. I need you to help me understand that. Instead, I would read lips and I would try and figure out for myself the solutions, and I work harder, not smarter. And so I think, you know, as a young person, I wish I could have voiced to people,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I need help. I need guidance. I don't know what I'm doing. And instead I just was very independent and kind of took things on my own and tried to figure out my solutions by myself.
Right.
And sometimes those solutions took me down the longest road you could ever find. I finally got there, but could have gotten there through some shortcuts.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're reinventing the wheel a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question for you that is my lifelong question, and that is, why do you think hate spreads faster than love, or do you even believe that's true?
Evil is evil. There's a lot in this world, unfortunately, but I really think that it comes out of hurt, you know, and I think that whatever level and depth of hurt and however many hurts you've had, you start to behave a certain way. And so I think some of the hatred is the root of it is real deep wounds,
Yeah.
you know, that people don't know how to reconcile other than to lash back.
Okay. No, I was in a meeting recently, and this gentleman was just not behaving well. I mean, it was out of context even to what the meeting was about. He was ranting about things. How do you use that information or that belief, you know, that it comes from a place of hurt? How do you use that in those types of settings when you're a leader? Do you see people and read them with that thought in mind?
Not necessarily. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
And so when I do come across someone who is just challenging,
Mm-hmm.
at first I don't think, oh, they must have a lot of hurts. Sometimes I think, you know, they're just being entitled. They feel like they need to behave a certain way.
Right.
But then the other part of me, once I see this over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen this over and over again with difficult people that I've had to come across, that either they have felt slighted in their career, they felt irrelevant, but they've not felt heard, or they have so many personal challenges going on that they're just trying to stay and keep and cling on to the role that they have. So I have a project team that I run, and there's a surgeon who agreed to champion the project. And he has been sometimes very difficult to work with. And just recently we had a virtual Zoom, and he was in his home and he was with his two little ones. And, I saw him, one, as a person, no longer as this surgeon that is trying to push his way or be a roadblock. And then two, he just somehow let his guard down and said, I've just had a lot going on. It's been difficult. When he let his guard down just for that 1/2 a second, it made me realize he's human too. He's got probably personal stuff going on, and his work is his outlet. And so it kind of gave me a level of understanding and some compassion. Now, that's not the case for everyone. Some people will literally be like, he's a jerk. I don't want to have anything to do with him or anyone. That's just how people are. They have zero tolerance and zero capacity for empathy or compassion or even apologies or excuses. And so that's just the world we live in. But I think for me, what makes me effective as a leader is that I recognize that outside of this role and this hat that people have, they've got other stuff going on. And sometimes one little thing can be that breaking point for them where they do behave poorly without realizing they're behaving poorly because they've had so much going on in their personal life that it just almost like the straw that breaks the camel back.
Yeah.
And so that's something that working with people so much from all walks of life, I realize they're carrying other things in their life. No one is in their role, whether they're CEO, VP, or down to a staff person. They want to do their best. They want to produce. They want to be relevant. They want to use their intellect and have a meaningful impact. But a lot of them just don't know how to do it when they've got pressures of personal things going on, whether health issue, family issues, money issues, whatever it is. And so I think for me, I've come to recognize that because I've been there. And I'm a little less hesitant to judge someone.
Yeah. And this quarantine virtual meetings have really helped, because I'm in my little sweater and then you see the dog running by or your son comes in the shot, Mom, I need help.
Right.
And you really just reminded these great and powerful people are human beings, just like everybody else. They have to use the bathroom. Their kids cry. Their wife might yell at them once in a while when they walk out the door.
Yeah.
But we're all just working human beings, and we go to work and we put on a different mask. Thank you so much for all of this. I need to ask you one more question, and that is, what book would you advise other women to read? What's the one book?
So I love this book. I read it a while ago, and I've picked it up maybe 1 or 2 times since, but it's The Art of Possibility. And it's by Rosamund Stone Zander and Benjamin Zander, their husband and wife. Okay. And he's a conductor of an orchestra, Philharmonic Orchestra. And they talk about, the art of possibility in your personal life and your professional life, and how sometimes we can look at a situation and we think there's no possible way that we could get whatever we want out of that. But if we look at it in a different way, in a different angle, and don't conform to the measures of this world, then we can have the ability to see the possibilities of something that might seem impossible. And so that for me has been helpful, especially because working in corporate America, you're driven by performance. If you don't meet this performance box, you're nobody, and you're underperforming. And so that defines you as a person. And this book talks about, don't live your life in that box.
Right.
What are things that you can do that are possible if you think differently about it?
Okay. The Art of Possibility. I've never heard of that book. I'm going to have to check that one out and share it with some people I know who are stuck in the box. I didn't tell the truth. I have one more question. What is the one thing that you cannot miss doing every day?
I cannot.
Other than brushing your teeth or looking at your phone. No.
I cannot miss making my bed.
Oh, okay.
I have to have my bed made before I do anything. Because for me, if I am unproductive in everything I do in that day, I know I have accomplished one thing. I've made my bed.
That's awesome. I'm not a bed maker. I've tried, but yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that's I've been that way since very young. I make my bed as soon as I get out of it.
Okay.
Because it makes me feel like I've accomplished something, and it helps me to be organized mentally, to set my day to feel organized. Because when you look at a messy bed, you feel like, oh, okay, I'll have to get to that later. And then, and it does something to you, I think. does
Yeah.
something to me.
And there are a lot of people who mention that early morning routine. Either it's a mental routine where you wake up and you think about certain things or you do certain things. There's something about setting up the beginning of your day. So I think that's actually a great tip because some of them are more complicated. Get up at 4:30 and go for a run. And, some people are like, yeah, whatever. But that one is pretty straightforward, a good way to start. Get up and make that bed. And you see, look, I got it accomplished. And this is what I'm going to be, organized and ready.
Right.
So I like that one. I might try it, but no promises. So for all of our listeners, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Contact me personally through LinkedIn under my name. Sometimes it might be under my maiden name, which is Roberts. So Carolyn Roberts Alessi, or under Carolyn Alessi. If you wanted to get in touch with me in terms of your interest in being involved in the Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter, you can certainly look on to our website or our Facebook page. MW Mentors CT is our Facebook page, or our LinkedIn page, Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter.
And are you looking for anyone specific for that? You looking for mentors? What do you outline?
Anyone who wants to get involved, either mentoring, volunteering to be a panelist, volunteering to do a workshop, a virtual workshop, volunteering their knowledge and expertise in terms of mentoring. I know a lot of women have really effectively mentored young women. And so if you have a way to do that and a particular systematic approach, we'd love to learn and know and understand, because sometimes mentoring can be a little more challenging. If you have knowledge in terms of your own personal, professional career that you want to share with young professionals or women in transition, we love that too. We love to hear from you. So any way that you want to get involved, we have plenty of opportunity for that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. I appreciate the professional you are and the woman you are. And I will just share with everyone that what I love about you most is that, like I mentioned earlier, very measured and you're very professional, very intelligent, but you're also so very human, and people can connect with you on that level and know that they'll be cared for, even as you're trying to be boss lady, as my new term. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thank you, Julia. It's been a pleasure to be on this podcast, F50 Woman. I think it's a wonderful way for us women to share our knowledge and insight and support one another. So thank you for having me on here.
You've been listening to the F50 Woman podcast. Join the F50 Woman movement and this diverse group of voices to help change the world one woman at a time. Why should you join at your age? Because we're not done yet.